Good evening, good afternoon in America, good morning on the other side of the world. Don't know why I said that, but welcome to the Irish NFL show presented by Pundit Arena. Welcome into our first post-Periscope experience. I hope everybody can first of all see us and then hopefully hear us as well. Very nerve-wracking experience, boys. I think I've done everything. We've got Twitter covered, we've got Facebook covered. We're on Twitch. So if you're watching us on Twitch, welcome in. Boys, welcome to the show. Brian, welcome to the show. Colin, welcome to the show. Mark, how's it going, boys?
Good evening. How are we all?
Look how happy Brian is. Brian is delighted. Brian has been waiting to chat about the Eagles, I think, for weeks. So he's delighted. But nice to be going live on a Thursday to talk football.
Yeah, lovely to talk about it. But did something happen? Something happened today, guys.
I'm glad you asked that, my friend. I'm glad you asked that, and my fancy new overlay will tell us below. Carson Wentz has been traded to the Colts, though obviously a third-round pick in 2021, conditional 2022 second rounder for the former Eagles quarterback, and Tom O'Brien will just put that in there now. Obviously, a former Super Bowl champion as well in Carson Wentz. I know he didn't play in the Super Bowl, but Brian, let's just jump straight into it, man. Obviously, huge news today. I think it came out around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, a bit like that JJ Watt news. What was your thoughts when this news hit the press?
Well, similar to the Watt situation, it didn't come as a surprise. It didn't even come as a surprise of who he was traded to, because for the last fortnight, even around Super Bowl time, the general consensus was it was either going to be the Colts or the Bears, and it was a case of who put up the best deal for the Eagles. And if you're led to believe by what's been published over the past few days, it was actually the Bears that had the better deal, but he had made it very clear that his intention was to go and play in Indianapolis. So from an Indianapolis Colts point of view, bearing in mind what they've given up with 3 this year, a conditional second round next year, which could turn into a 1 depending on how successful he is in terms of playing next season, which is always up in the air because he is quite injury prone. So from the Colts point of view, with an offensive line that should be able to protect him and a head coach that has a lot of familiarities with and a good relationship, I think it's a good deal for the Colts. Where this leaves the Eagles, they're in a no-win-win situation. I think back to when the Giants, from my perspective, traded Beckham and Gettleman, got so much heat because he was 16 million in dead cap. So we're so far removed from that deal. But the Eagles, 33.8 million in dead cap going into this season. Whatever way you look at this, okay, they wanted to get rid of him and they want to move on. The general manager is under so much pressure already going into the off season, and even this evening there's further conversations around ripping the whole thing up. Zach Ertz is probably the next person in line to be traded, and that could happen in the next fortnight as well. So it looks like it's a complete rebuild in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen Colin Zach Ertz in the last game of the season last year. Philly didn't have any fans in from I think September or so. So it was a very hard season for them on a personal level, and I guess a lot of teams as well. But Zach Ertz looked like he was done in Philly. Do you think this move's been going for some time, or were you surprised that there wasn't as many other teams in for it?
Yes and no. I think Carson Wentz, it's a while since we saw him really put on a show. It's been a struggle for him over the last few years. You'll always get somebody roll a dice on a QB in the NFL. They'll go off a tape from years and years ago. We saw Joe Flacco pick up a job, and he continues to pick up jobs. Somebody will take a chance on Jameis Winston this offseason as well. It's just how it goes. I think to me, I suppose it makes a lot of sense where he's gone and the cost of it. Essentially, this is like he's only getting paid for 2 years. After that, there's no dead money, so you can cut him if you want to. So really, you only are looking at this year and next year, and for the Colts, if it's a third and a second, then it's worth kicking the tires. If he performs, it becomes a third and a first, and he becomes your guy for the next few years. It's still worthwhile. To me, it tells you, the value that there is in seeing a QB in the league and not just on potential. And look, it's Frank Reich. It's been talked about before, the relationship that they had. They were very, very close. We've talked about it on the show before. Frank Reich made a an immediate bond with Philip Rivers. The talk was in relation to their kind of deep Christian faith. Carson Wentz, they share that. Apparently that was something that existed when they were in Philly together. If anyone is going to get Carson Wentz back to where he was, it'll be Frank Reich. It's worth kicking the tires on it for me. For it, if it doesn't work, what have they lost? They've lost a third and a second, and they look at it next year. I think the dead cap on it next year is in and around the 25 million, less than ideal, obviously, but you can get out of jail free after 2022.
Mark, I know you had a busy week, busy day today, but I was chatting to you just when this news broke. There's no off-season, is there? There's never an off-season in this league.
No, I mean, look, Roger Goodell would have it no other way. The fact that we are still talking about trades and free agency and, cuts and things like this, and we don't even have the draft yet, we don't even have live free agency, proves that the NFL is the daddy of them all and dominates the news cycles. There's lots of facets of this deal, though, that are fascinating for me. Obviously, the cap hit for the Eagles, like $33 million, the biggest in NFL history. I believe it's only 5 deals in history, or 5 cuts in history, that have had a cap hit of more than 20 million. And 3 of them have already been this offseason with the 3 quarterbacks of Stafford, Goff, and Wentz. I think there's a lot of people who've been willing to bury Carson Wentz. And for me, I remember his 2017 season where he was, if he had stayed healthy, the MVP. He should have won the MVP over Brady that year if he had stayed healthy. And of course, that's the big if. He's got injured so much, and he did look a shadow of his former self, certainly this season. But I do remember back when Andrew Luck had a very poor 2015 season, and there was a big dip, and Colts fans were suddenly looking at themselves and going, oh, what's going on here? And look at what he's going into. It's not just Frank Reich. It's a decent running game. It's a really strong O-line, maybe with the exception of left tackle need to do something, and it's a brilliant defense. So he has, he couldn't have got a better landing spot to see if he can be saved. And to be honest, I'm one of those that I think he can be saved, and he will still have an effective career. You look at people like Ryan Tannehill, who got the change of scenery in Tennessee and proved that the talents he does have in the right scheme, in the right setup, can be exploited and can be successful. And so I think it's a good bit of business by the Colts, but the poor old Eagles, I equally don't think Jalen Hurts is the answer for them, to be frank. So the question is, are they now back in the market at number 6 for quarterback? That's going to be a serious question, I think, come up to the draft.
I dipped into Philly radio. Sorry, Michael. I dipped into Philly radio this evening. I couldn't help myself. I had to see what the general consensus was. And a lot of the fans are ringing in saying they do not want another quarterback drafted. They just think they've made their bed now. Go with Hurts and start rebuilding the offensive line, or even on defense, in order to allow the team to push on.
We see, for me on that one, and I'll just give you my 2 cents, Jalen Hurts is an amazing athlete. God knows, he's 10 times more athletically capable than the 4 of us put together. However, he is not an NFL level quality starting quarterback, in my view. He kind of proved after his first few games, yes, he can run well with the ball, yes, he can do a job, but he doesn't have the accuracy, he doesn't have the deep ball sufficiently, and therefore he's not potentially the future. Look, we're asking question marks about Tua. Remember, he got beaten out by Tua in college in Alabama. So, whether the context is there, I still think Carson Wentz will have a better NFL quarterback career from this point on than Jalen Hurts.
That's a very interesting thing to say there. Well, look, this is the beauty of it being live and the fact that we can get it on demand on our podcast. If that does happen next season, we can just come back and say, Mark, remember the time you said about Carson Wentz? I don't know, boys. I think I'm going to say this now because I can't put the new Twitter media studio on the chat. We got a comment there from Declan. Draft a left tackle. Reich helps to get his confidence back. This is a good deal. He has shown his quality. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a good deal for Indianapolis because it suits their system. Look at Pat McAfee today, boys. He was on holidays on the beach, buzzing with this deal. Would Wentz have worked at a number of other AFC teams? No. Would he have worked at my team? Hell no. I'm very happy today. But I think it's a good move for him. I think he's going to fit in with Reich very well. Time will see. But I guess that leads me on to the next sort of topic, boys. Before we talk about the Eagles, does this move, Brian, in your opinion, make Indianapolis a contender in the AFC? Okay, maybe not in the short term, but do you think that goes a long way to it? Because you see a lot of people today talking about it.
I think if you look at last season, and Rivers, despite his age, had a really productive season. And a lot of that's down to the fact that the offensive line is so good. And a lot of people felt that they had a really good opportunity in that game in Buffalo during the playoffs, and they got away from they only lost by a field goal in the end. And by and large, they had a really good season. Do I think that will put them over the top in terms of getting towards the Super Bowl? It's a difficult one because we haven't seen what's gone on in free agency or the draft and stuff like that. But I do think if the offensive line plays as well as they have been, and they do correct that left tackle situation, Wentz won't be getting sacked record numbers like he was last season for the Eagles, and he will get time. And he has proven over the years that if he's given the opportunity to play, he is a really good quarterback. It's a bit like it just became a part of the ways that had to happen. It wasn't because of his skill set; it's more so because he's just been in a bad situation for a couple of years. We touched on last week around Sam Darnold. Is he still a good quarterback? He's only 23 years of age. He still has a good opportunity in the league. But the last 3 years in New York with the Jets wasn't down to him in particular. It was just a very bad situation that he was in. Similar enough to what Wentz has had. I do think the Colts would have a really good opportunity next season to certainly be in the running, at least for the championship game.
Colin, what's your thoughts, man?
Look, I think that Carson Wentz, this is it. Like, we get to see now, is rehabilitation possible? Mark has outlined everything that he's going to have. He has the coach he wants, and we get to see. You get a second chance in the league. Can he take it? To me, if Frank Reich can get Carson Wentz back to anywhere near the 2017 level, given the team that they have, if they can get a tackle, if refs continue to I suppose penalize or not penalize O-line guys in terms of holding, we've talked about that before, you can get a guy from college and plug and play in this league now. So to me, Jonathan Taylor, they should be a contender, but I think we'll know very quickly. I think you'll know by week 10 in terms of whether Wentz is likely to be the starter there in 2022 or not, because they'll want to have an idea in terms of that 75% of snaps. So I think we'll know early. Frank Reich will get his hands on him, and he'll either be able to fix him or he won't. But we'll learn pretty quickly. I would imagine by the end of October, you'll know where the Carson Wentz project stands.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts, Mark?
I was going to say, Michael, I don't think it makes Indy a contender. I think Indy already are a contender. I mean, they're a playoff team. They're playing in a pretty weak division. I mean, the dumpster fire that's going on in Houston, I feel very sad for Texan fans, obviously, in everything that's going on and the drama they're going to continue to go on. But it doesn't look like they're going to be in a great position at this point in time, in this February, starting the season off. Jaguars are going to rebuild around Trevor Lawrence, but will probably take some time. This far out, it looks like it's between them and the Titans for the division, so therefore they've got a great shot at playoffs. And yes, the Bills are going to be in contention, the Chiefs are going to be in contention, but they'll be there or thereabouts. As I said, I don't want to throw Wentz in the bus. Even last season, with the record number of 50 sacks, with everything else going on, he had some games where, I mean, the dime, I'm sure Brian remembers the Boston Scott in the last minute of the Giants game. He still has an arm. He also has something that Philip Rivers most certainly does not have, which is mobility. And that's the one thing in a Frank Reich-led offense which transforms and adds that added dimension. He will be able to get out on bootlegs. He will be able to scramble on third and fourth. And so I think it opens up Reich's capabilities, hopefully, if you're a Colts fan, of course, in the play calling. So, those aspects, I think it's so intriguing from a Colts perspective. I think you look at what's available out there. Were they going to get Deshaun Watson? Were they going to pay that ransom? No, I don't think that's a Chris Ballard play, to be very frank with you. And I think he's doing a great job as a GM in this regard. And I agree entirely with Colin. Bear in mind, it's not just that it's 75% qualified, but if they make the playoffs and he plays more than 70%, then equally it triggers the second into a first. So I give it actually to week 8 almost, when they're actually going to have to make a call early and say, you know what, if they've backed into a 5-3 record and Wentz hasn't been playing really well and everything, when do you start limiting his pitch count? Because you really don't want to give up that first. And Wentz costs a lot. Like, remember what he cost the Eagles? They traded up from 8-2 in the 17 draft. They gave up, if I remember correctly, a first, a third, and a fourth in that draft, a first in the 17 draft, and a second in the 18 draft. Like, there's a hell of a lot of draft capital between him and Jared Goff, which has gone sorely to waste over the last couple of weeks and couple of years. So, yeah, look, I think the Colts are definitely a contender. I think Wentz can be saved. I'm not saying like, oh my God, he's the Messiah coming in. But it's, you know, if I'm a Colts fan, and I certainly am not, I would be quite positive about this development. You know, it's a good move, obviously, after losing Rivers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the sense of the Colts. You know, I was actually quite impressed with how they played with Rivers last year, and I wasn't shocked to see Rivers retire, but I would have loved to see them make another go in Indy for another year. But I'd love to know how long that Wentz deal had been done. There was obviously whispers over the last couple of days that it was very close, but I think it's interesting. But in terms of saying, like, you know, are they a contender? Of course, they're a contender in the sense that they're in the playoffs. But what takes them further than that? And I've seen a few guys today. Colin won't like me saying this. Von Miller in that defense would be a very interesting free agency pickup if they'd done it. It would kill me personally, but Von Miller would be a fantastic pickup for that Colts team, boys. I think it's going to be a very interesting couple of months. Very interesting month up to Paddy's Day for free agency, because I don't think the Colts are done in terms of free agency. I think they're going to bring in somebody big on the defensive side of the ball. And I agree. I think give Wentz up to the first 8 weeks, he would need to be sitting 5-3, or if there's a bye week, 5-2. Or is it harsh? What do you think, boys?
Michael, can I make a quick one? It'll be interesting to see what they do with T.Y. Hilton. He's actually right now a free agent. The likelihood is they will push to bring him back. Some of their receivers towards the back end of the season stepped up, some of the younger receivers. So they may decide, you know what, maybe it's just not worth the price, and they move on and try to bring something else in from free agency. But that's the next domino for the Colts, is to make a decision what they're going to do there, because, you know, they might look at that now and say, right, we've got the quarterback, let's get T.Y. Hilton signed up for the long term, because, you know, he has been a bit injury prone at times, but when he is playing, he is arguably one of the best top 5 wide receivers in the league, I'd say.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Michael, just make one point. We are dealing with a historic free agency for wide receivers. You look at the quality of wide receivers that are available. So you might have some teams, they're making interesting decisions at quarterback and moving on. They might also dip their toes and change up at the wide receiver position with the amount of players that are there. But we should also look at the other side of this equation, because if you're in the Eagles now, and in fact, the other people that looking at this with glee are probably Cowboys fans. Because very quickly, Dak Prescott is, you know, clearly the class quarterback in that entire division. Alex Smith is up there as well, but other than that, like, there's no other quarterback worthy of the name probably in the other teams in that division, I would say.
I'm not gonna bite there, so keep going.
Well, look, I think we're actually gonna stay in that division just really quickly. Obviously, Wentz leaves the Eagles a Super Bowl champion, albeit he isn't playing. I'm just going to keep saying he's a Super Bowl champion because he is. He's got a ring. So is Brock Osweiler. So is other guy. I mean, we could make a whole list of guys that have got a ring. But fair play to him in that sense. The big question is this, because we're coming into draft season, we're coming into free agency season. Where does Philly go from here? I was lucky. Well, it wasn't that lucky, boys. I was chatting to a guy on the Eagles team last night in a different show. And I am fuming now because it's pre-recorded. Obviously, Wentz is gone. And I could have at least asked them today, you know, what's your thoughts, at least off camera. But where, Brian, look, I'll start with you, man. I know you're jumping on there a second ago. Where does Philly go from here? Take your Giants hat off. You know, if you're just looking at Philly's main aim next season is to try and challenge for the NFC East. Where do they go from here? Do they go with Hurts? And I know you've already touched on that, but is there anybody in that draft, especially those top 5 quarterbacks, maybe Mac? Anybody stand out for you, man, for the Eagles?
Well, there's 4 quarterbacks that are likelihood to go in the top 10. Lawrence obviously pretty much given up number 1. There's Wilson, there's Fields, and there's Chase. But the situation with Hurts is they only drafted him last year. He was a number 2 pick. If they bring in a quarterback to challenge him, the likelihood is at number 1 in the 6th pick of the draft, he's going to be the quarterback sooner rather than later. You're not going to get very much back thereafter for Hurts after using the 2 pick last year. So in a situation where it's already a bit of a mess, shall we say, in terms of the dead cap, they've also got a situation where they've only drafted a quarterback to potentially next year could be worth very little in return. I think in the long run, they will just make a decision to go with him for a year, because I do think they're going to be in a rebuild. That they're not going to have a lot of cap to do a lot in free agency. There's going to be other players released to free up money in order to allow them to even sign some of the guys who are in their third or fourth year of their contracts in order to keep them. So for me, it's going to be a massive rebuild, and I don't believe they'll take a quarterback at 6. I think they'll look at different parts of the team that needs to be corrected.
And Colin, we're going to look in a little minute at the teams that actually were in for Wentz in our next topic. But for you, where does Philly go from here? Do you agree with Brian, or do you think they should just go mad?
It's tough to know, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did roll the dice. Look, it's the way in which the league has changed. And it's changed in terms of quarterback play. It's changed in terms of running back play. It's changed in terms of rules. It's changed in terms of the way teams approach the draft. I think we were talking last week, and I don't know, was it Brian or what was it Mark gave the stat about like not a single QB drafted in the first round from 2009, 2016 is still on their original team. Teams move on from QBs now. It is a QB carousel, and you mightn't get that much time at one team, but you end up going elsewhere. Whether you make it elsewhere or not, that's the question. Hi, Paxton Lynch. So I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to roll the dice, because you're in a window when you have a guy on a rookie deal. I don't know if they will have really felt that Hurts was the future for the franchise. We all saw the shenanigans that went on in the last game of the season, and obviously they have the change at head coach. To me, you keep rolling the dice until you find the guy and he's the guy. Do they really believe it? It's going to be a difficult one, because obviously with the change of head coach, does he know what he really wants? So I really don't know. They're in a really tough spot this season. They're in a really, really tough spot with the cap, with not knowing what they want to do, with a head coach who I don't think they really wanted. I think they wanted Frank Reich there, and they didn't get him. So all sorts of strange things happening at the Eagles, and I'm probably the person on this show with the softest spot for Philadelphia. I love my time in the city, but I think Philly has all sorts of issues going into the 2021 season.
What do you think, Mark?
I don't mind Philadelphia. The Lord giveth and he taketh away. We beat them in one Super Bowl and lost to them in another. It's the way of the world, I think. I think when it comes to the Hurts situation, as I said, I honestly don't think he's the future. I think he had some good games, and then I think he got a little bit more found out by the league. And obviously, as opposed to the college game, everyone is a supernatural athlete. And you can't get by just on athletic gifts. You have to have the accuracy, particularly the quarterback position. Two key things. It was Brian with the stat before about the 2009 to 2016 quarterbacks that not one now is on the original team they started with, despite obviously a lot of big first-round names in there. But I'll give you another stat. 47 out of the 55 Super Bowls have been won by Hall of Fame quarterbacks or quarterbacks who will soon go into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, Philly are one of the teams that didn't have a quarterback in that category when they won their Super Bowl. But the surest way to success, proven over time, over ages, is to have a quarterback of quality, of standing, that can go on and win yourself Super Bowls, championships, and go on. Do I think Jalen Hurts is that person? No. And if I'm Philadelphia and I make that calculation, then I say, well, then I'm going to use the 6th round to go pick of the draft and try and find one. And it's true that in the current marketplace, the greatest market inefficiency the GMs and coaches can take advantage of is a quarterback on the rookie wage scale. It's been proven in the last number of years that is the best way to build up a team, is you take advantage of that inefficiency. And Bill Barnwell, who writes for ESPN, a few years ago he came out with a theory that sounded bizarre at the time, but I wonder if the GM will ever be brave enough to try it. He said, draft a new first-round rookie quarterback every 3 years and just move on to them. Never give them a second contract. Let them go. And with everything that's happened with Goff, with Wentz and his second contracts, it doesn't seem to be as crazy as he previously said. But he said, look, you will always have that market inefficiency. You'll have that market asset, and you can leverage it. I don't think anyone will ever try and do it, but it's an interesting philosophy in theory. Love to see someone try it. Love to. Go on, Philly. Do it for the laugh.
And what I would say in the Hurts situation is that did we really see enough from him towards the end of the season? I know, Mark, you're not convinced by him, but he only played a handful of games. He started off quite well in terms of the game. He beat the Saints, and then he had a really good game in Arizona. And then we obviously had that situation in the fourth quarter of the last game of the season where he was pulled off the field for other reasons by Doug Peterson. But, is there a part of the Philadelphia fan base would say, do you know what, we don't know if he's good enough yet. We need to see a little bit more of him before we can make that decision. And as far as the draft is concerned, I guess maybe they will go down the quarterback route if a particular quarterback falls to them. But they might look at a situation where there's 3 standout wide receivers expected to go by the 11th pick. They will get their opportunity to get one of those because other teams who are QB needy will pick quarterbacks. So they might decide give Hurts another standout wide receiver in the draft and allow him to play the game and see will that work instead of taking the quarterback.
Well, boys, this is the thing. Hurts has played 4 games in the NFL. 4 games. Okay. Now, if you compare his first four games to that of Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, Hurts is better than them in pass yards, pass touchdowns, better than Russell Wilson in rushing yards, more rushing touchdowns than both of them boys. Not the best completion rate. So you can't decide 4 games in if it's, and this is what annoys me sometimes. Actually goes into the whole Liverpool talk. I hate Liverpool Football Club, but the talk around them the last couple of days was a disgrace. I mean, you go through hard times. It's not going to be Philly and great crack unless you actually give Hurts the chance. Hurts deserves the season. You can't go and I wouldn't even go. I would bring in the veteran, maybe bring in Andy Dalton, somebody, just anybody to fill the gap. Somebody that's not going to start even. Let's see what happens. But that's it. Just before we go on to the next topic and before we get some final points, with a few comments. The comments aren't coming up on our new system. Thank you, Periscope, and thank you, Twitter, for that. Claire de Bear, thank you very much for sharing the broadcast as well. We really appreciate it. She says, I'm glad the Bears have dodged this bullet, and the quarterback is the keystone possession in the NFL. We're about to talk about the Bears now, but Claire also said there are some teams worried about this year's draft, as not a lot of college games and no combine. Now, I guess we'll talk about this more in the whole build-up to the draft. But Colin, just to yourself on before we move on to the Bears, there's a few quarterbacks in that draft that have played no more than 4 or 5 games in the last 12 months. Do you think that's an issue, or are you not bothered about it?
You'd prefer if it was different, obviously, but I think that the combine is probably something that people. It's a nice spectacle to watch, and it gives people all of these stats, and we love stats. But realistically, how much really does it tell you? It doesn't tell you. I mean, it's a bit like keepy uppies. You can be the world's best keepy uppy guy, but put you in a game and have somebody kick you around the pitch. It's the fortitude to go into a game, and when a Von Miller or a Mack is coming to take your head off, that you're able to stand there. Like, the combine isn't going to show you that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to have his face mask torn off and he's still going to be able to throw that. That to me, we'll miss the spectacle, but teams will have done their homework. The good teams, other teams will draft guys without ever having met them and expect them to be franchise QBs. That has really happened. So I mean, that this is the fascinating thing about the NFL to me, is that you have billion-dollar franchises, right? And they just make decisions on a whim. So we will miss the spectacle of it. We'll end up with a load of pro days and guys kind of throwing and kind of going through the motions. But will it make a difference in terms of who really shines? Like, did anyone expect, like in the draft last year, that Justin Jefferson was going to be the standout rookie wide receiver? No, they didn't. So the transition to the league is a lot more than the combine. As Mark said, everyone is a physical specimen in college. It's when you get to play with the big boys, and it's all of the stuff off the ball, the yapping. That's all the stuff you have to deal with when you get into the big leagues.
A concern that some players have, I suppose, they removed themselves from the most recent season, but the reality is the teams are just going back to the original coverage of the 2019 season. Jamar Chase is expected to be the second wide receiver off the board. He didn't play last year. He opted out. And he's the previous season, 78 to 80 catches, 14 touchdowns in a really good LSU team that was Joe Burrow. That's the footage they're going to look at because that's the most recent stuff. And that's where they're going to go. And even players who are going to get drafted who did play this year, for example, Waddle, another wide receiver, dislocated his ankle in the very first game of the season for Alabama in October, didn't come back to the championship game, wasn't fit, played a bit in the game. He's still going to go in the top 15 wide receiver because there's enough footage over the years to justify him going. So no, it's not ideal that some players haven't played a lot, but you know yourself, it's a bit of a punt at times come draft time, and teams panic as well, which doesn't always help.
Yes, sir. And at Dooney R says that Ryan Fitzpatrick should back up Hurts in Philadelphia. That'll be interesting to see. Lads, we have to get Fitzpatrick on the show at some point to talk about the crack, the beards, etc. Any final points on Philly before we move on, gentlemen? Any final points? Now is your time, or forever hold your silence until at least tomorrow night's show.
Michael, just $33 million of a cap hit. Like, Philly are not looking forward to next season in that sense itself. Their flexibility is completely stung. But if it pans out in the long term, Philly fans won't mind. But next season, $33 million on a player that won't even be playing for you. It's not exactly about 175 million, I believe, or between 175 and 180. So a small increase on the floor, but cap flexibility is going to be even more critical.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's jump on that again tomorrow night, lads. We're back tomorrow night as well. We'll talk about it at the end. One final topic that I want to jump on tonight, boys, is what's going on in Chicago. There's a few Bears fans watching. Twitter over the last few days, and this is not just for Wentz, but for different guys. JJ Watt, obviously, we'll talk about this tomorrow night. The whole Buffalo Bills rumors coming out, the Cleveland Browns rumors coming out. It's rumor season, and there's a lot of things that were being said about the interest in Wentz over the last week or two. And Jay Glazer today indicated that as far as he's concerned, the Bears never made an offer. However, Adam Kaplan said the Bears backed out at the last minute. Maybe not at the last minute, but close to the end. And that the Panthers were also interested. Jump on that as well. You've seen, was it Mike Lombardi on the Pat McAfee show saying that Denver and San Francisco were both interested in quarterbacks, secretly interested in quarterbacks. So I'm going to start with you now, Brian. What's your thoughts on what's going on in Chicago? Do you think there was many teams in for Carson Wentz, or do you think it was all a smokescreen from the Eagles to try and get more offers?
No, I do genuinely believe the Bears were involved in the running. Again, it depends which journalist you read, because you turn on to the Alvin Purr show and he's saying that the Bears had the best offer. And it wasn't so much that they pulled out, but to just recognise the fact that he decided himself that where he wanted to go was to go to Indianapolis, which put the Colts in the position to not give up as much as initially everybody thought. They might get the first round now because of a conditional. But the Bears are in a precarious situation because of where they're drafting, because the likelihood is, whilst you can pick up a Lamar Jackson later in the draft and it works out for you 9 times out of 10, the guys that are drafted in the top end are the ones that really fulfill their potential in the league. So the Bears are in a tricky position picking. I think it's at 19. So for me, right now, I said in November on the show, I suppose my wild pick at the time was Sam Darnold would end up in Chicago. And I still believe that to happen. I think he's the next domino as part of the process that's going to fall, because I think we'd all would recognize, I think the Jets are going to move on from him, whether it's getting the trade for Watson, which we've discussed over the past few weeks, or whether they just utilize that number 2 pick to take who they believe to be the next best quarterback after Lawrence, whether it's Wilson or whether it's Fields. So for me, it's already well known that they're out there shopping him. And I think that's where the Bears will turn their attention to, because he is only 23, and I still think he has got the potential to be a good quarterback in the league. And, you mightn't have to give up that 1 pick. You might get him for a 3 or a 2, but I think that's where the Bears go next. But again, that's just me surmising what I'm saying. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen.
The Chicago Bears, I thought they're contractually obliged not to have a decent starting QB, which is unfortunate for such a storied franchise. But they've had issues at quarterback for almost as long as I've been watching this game. I think Brian is, could be onto something in terms of Sam Darnold. The other talk that there has been, which is probably more unlikely, but you'd never rule it out, and especially with the talk of the Broncos looking at Deshaun Watson, I would never rule out Gruden, rolling the dice. So could they, parlay Derek Carr into enough capital with what the Raiders have themselves to bring in to make an offer for Deshaun Watson? I think that's a possibility. That would be, I think, the other thing that I could see happening. I think Gruden is bold enough to do it. If there's anyone, who'd be willing to do it. I mean, Bruce Arians doesn't need a quarterback. Andy Reid doesn't need a quarterback. John Gruden would love to do it. And he would be the story of the offseason if that was the case. So could Derek Carr end up in Chicago? That would be less likely, but it would be a phenomenal story if it were to happen. And as a Broncos fan, if Deshaun Watson ended up in the AFC West and you had Watson, Herbert, and Mahomes, that would be quite sad indeed.
Odds on favourite, Mark, before you say anything, Mark, odds on favourite to land Watson as of tonight? Sorry, I had a bit in it.
No, I think Colin's just being pessimistic there in terms of the likelihood. I mean, look, we're talking about the Bears. They don't need my sympathy, but we're talking about exactly what you're saying, Colin. One of the most storied franchises in all of NFL history. They're the winningest franchise of all time, 777 wins. They're renowned for George Halas. They're renowned for the famous 46 defense. Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, amazing team, obviously back in the 80s. And yet, when it comes to the quarterback position, year after year, time after time, it is a bloodbath. I mean, you look at their 5 career passing leaders. Jay Cutler is the winningest and the winningest quarterback of all time for the Chicago Bears, but he's passed for the most yards. Then it's Sid Luckman. Then it's Jim Harbaugh, Jim McMahon, and then Mitch Trubisky. Like, for everything that's said about him, he has passed for the 5th most yards of all time for the Chicago Bears. And yes, the game is different. And yes, it's more of a passing league now. But we're talking about a franchise that is jointly the oldest franchise in the NFL. And that is heartbreaking, I imagine, to many Chicago Bears fans. They've got to get it right one time. They've got to get it right at some point. I just don't really have any faith in their head office to get it right this year. But yeah, we'll see.
Brian, just before you put a point in, man, a couple of comments because they're not coming up on here. They're coming on my phone. Claire the Bears said the league has changed and the Bears have not. Fact. I can't see it, Claire, but I seen you put a comment in about Chicago and mediocre quarterbacks as well, what we talked about. And I agree. Brian, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I've spoke to a good friend of mine who's a Bears fan, and it's very much reflective of what Claire the Bears saying, is that a lot of Bears fans are relieved that the Wentz thing hasn't come to pass in terms of him going to Chicago, because they knew they'd end up giving up more than what was being offered down in Indianapolis, and they just don't think he'd be the right answer in the long run. So I think whilst they missed out on him, I think secretly most Bears fans are kind of relieved that they haven't picked up the quarterback going forward.
And I'm on mute again. Well, first time using Restream, time will tell. Boys, I am delighted to let you know and to let everybody else know that we are back, please God, tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Ireland, UK time. That's 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Or if you're Jeff Reinbold, 12 p.m. in the afternoon. Please feel free, Jeff, to jump on if you can get some Wi-Fi anywhere. 10 p.m. tomorrow night. We're going to try and talk tomorrow night maybe about the current situation going on with JJ Watt, where he might go, the fact that the game in Dublin's been cancelled, and what that means for the London games, which nobody's talking about. We'll try and come to that tomorrow night. And we'll also try and come to another other points tomorrow night as well that we couldn't get on now. You can check out our podcast on all good podcast providers, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just search for the Irish NFL Show. This will be up by about 11 tonight. And we will see you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. But I guess for now, I want to thank everybody here for watching. And lads, have a good night, yeah?
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
Take care. Good luck.